The mystery of the giant stones. Thousands of years ago, people built something that still surprises us today. Huge stones were moved across the land and placed into massive structures. Some of these stones weighed several tons, but there was no modern machinery, no cranes, no trucks, no engines. So how did ancient people do it? This is the mystery we are going to explore. At first, these giant stones may seem impossible to move. Imagine standing in front of a stone that is taller than a person. Now imagine hundreds of people trying to move it with nothing more than simple tools. Yet ancient builders found ways to make it happen. They used wood, ropes, ramps, levers, and human strength. But tools were only part of the story. The real secret was organization. Moving a giant stone required many people working together. Someone had to prepare the ground. Others had to pull the ropes. Some people had to control the direction. Others had to build ramps and supports. Every movement had to be planned. A single mistake could destroy the work of hundreds of people. And these stones were not moved only a few meters. In some ancient projects, stone had to travel long distances from quarries to construction sites. This means ancient builders needed more than strength. They needed knowledge. They understood weight. They understood balance. They understood how objects moved. They also understood their environment. Rivers could help transport heavy stones. Wood could reduce friction. Ramps could turn a difficult climb into a gradual one. Simple ideas could create impressive results. But there is still a bigger question. Why did they build these enormous structures in the first place? Some were connected to religion. Some were tombs. Others may have marked important places or events. And some may have had purposes we still do not fully understand. The stones are still there. The people who moved them are gone. Their names are forgotten. But their work survived. And every massive stone raises the same question. How did they do it? To understand that mystery, we need to go back to the beginning. Before the great monuments, before the famous civilizations, to a time when humans first learned how to turn simple tools into something powerful. The simple tools that changed everything. The people who moved giant stones did not have modern machines, but they did have something just as important. They understood simple tools. One of the most useful tools was the lever. A long wooden pole could help a small group of people move a very heavy stone. The idea was simple. Push down on one side and the other side. Rises. With the right position, a lever could multiply human strength. Another important tool was the roller. Ancient workers could place wooden logs under a heavy stone and pull it forward. As the stone moved, the workers could move the logs from the back to the front. It was slow, but it worked. Ropes were also extremely important. Strong ropes made from plants could connect large groups of workers to the same stone. Instead of one person trying to move it, hundreds could pull together. But there was another problem. The ground. A heavy stone could easily become stuck in soft soil, so workers had to prepare the path. They could clear the ground, place wooden supports, or create a smoother surface. Water may also have helped reduce friction in some situations. The ancient builders did not need complicated technology. They needed to understand how the world around them worked, and they learned through experience. A failed attempt taught them something. A broken rope showed them how much weight it could carry. A damaged ramp showed them how to build it better. Over time, these small lessons became practical knowledge, and that knowledge could be passed from one generation to another. This is one of the most impressive parts of the story. The technology may look simple to us, but using it successfully on a huge scale was anything but simple. Thousands of people had to cooperate. They needed food, they needed water, they needed tools, they needed a plan, and they needed someone to organize the entire project. So the mystery of the stones is not only about engineering, it is also about human cooperation. A single person could never move a massive stone alone, but a large group working together could achieve something that seemed impossible, and this changed the world. Because once humans learned how to move heavy materials, they could build bigger homes, larger temples, stronger walls, and more impressive monuments. The giant stone was no longer just a piece of rock. It became a building block for civilization. But there was still one problem. How did ancient people move these stones over very long distances? That question takes us to the roads, rivers, and landscapes of the ancient world. The journey of the stone. Moving a giant stone was only the beginning. The real challenge was getting it to the right place. Some stones came from quarries many miles away. Ancient workers had to find a way to move them across difficult land. On land, wooden sledges were one possible solution. The stone could be placed on a strong wooden platform and pulled by many workers. The ground could be prepared to make the journey easier. Sometimes water was also useful. Rivers were natural highways for the ancient world. A heavy stone could be loaded onto a large wooden boat and carried downstream. This was often much easier than pulling it across land. But rivers were not available everywhere. When there was no river, workers had to depend on roads, sledges, rollers, animals, and human strength. The journey could take days, weeks, or even longer. Imagine watching a group of workers slowly pulling one enormous stone across the landscape. Every few meters they had to stop. The ropes had to be checked. The wooden supports had to be moved. The path had to be repaired. And everyone had to work together. A small mistake could cause the stone to shift or fall. That could destroy months of work, but ancient builders were patient. They understood that large projects could not be completed quickly. They were building for the future. In some places, entire roads were created just to transport materials. Workers cleared paths through forests and across hills. They built ramps where the land became too steep. They found ways around rivers and difficult terrain. The landscape itself became part of the construction plan. This also tells us something important about ancient societies. A giant monument was never built by a few people. Behind it were farmers growing food, workers making tools, people producing ropes, boat builders, stone cutters, transport workers, and leaders organizing everything. A single monument could involve an entire community, and perhaps that is the real achievement. The stone itself is impressive, but the cooperation needed to move it is even more impressive. Thousands of years later, we can still see the result. The roads may be gone. The wooden sledges may have disappeared. The ropes have returned to the earth, but the stones remain. They are the final evidence of a huge human effort. And once the stone finally arrived at the construction site, another challenge began. How could people lift something so heavy and place it exactly where they wanted? That is where the ancient builders needed their most careful ideas yet.
How did they lift the stones? Getting a giant stone to a construction site was a huge achievement. But the job was not finished. The stone still had to be lifted and placed. This was probably one of the most dangerous parts of the entire process. Ancient builders could use ramps to solve the problem. Instead of lifting a stone straight into the air, they could slowly pull it upward. A long ramp made the climb easier. The higher the stone needed to go, the longer the ramp could be. Workers could also use levers to make small adjustments. A few centimeters could make a big difference. The stone had to fit into exactly the right position. This required patience and careful planning. There was no room for a modern machine to make a quick correction. Everything depended on people. Workers pulling ropes, others controlling the stone, others watching the structure, and someone had to give the commands. One wrong movement could cause the stone to fall. It could damage the structure or seriously injure the workers. That is why ancient construction was not simply about strength. It was about timing. Everyone had to move together. The workers also needed to understand balance. A massive stone could be difficult to control if its weight was not distributed correctly. By using wooden supports, ropes, levers, and ramps, they could slowly guide it into place, step by step, little by little. Eventually, the stone reached its final position. And then something remarkable happened. The temporary tools disappeared. The wooden supports were removed. The ramps were taken apart. The ropes were gone. But the stone remained. Thousands of years later, we see only the finished monument. We do not see the workers. We do not see the mistakes. We do not see the countless hours of preparation. We only see the result. This can make ancient construction look almost impossible, but the truth may be simpler. Ancient people did not have magic technology. They had time, they had experience, and they had large groups of people working toward the same goal. That combination was powerful. It allowed them to create structures that still amaze us today. But there is another question. If moving giant stones was so difficult, why did ancient societies spend so much effort doing it? The answer may not be found in engineering. It may be found in religion, power, memory, and the human desire to create something that lasts.
Why build something so huge? By now, we know that moving giant stones was possible. But one question remains. Why did ancient people do it? The answer was different from place to place. For some societies, huge stones were connected to religion. They believed these monuments could bring them closer to their gods or protect the dead. For others, they were symbols of power. A massive monument showed that a ruler could organize thousands of people. It showed strength, it showed wealth, and it showed control. But there was also another reason: memory. Ancient people wanted certain places and certain people to be remembered. A giant stone could survive for thousands of years. Wood could disappear. Homes could collapse. People could be forgotten. But stone could remain. This may explain why so many ancient monuments were built from massive blocks. They were not only buildings, they were messages. They told future generations that someone had been there. Someone had built something. Someone had believed that their work was important. Think about that for a moment. Thousands of years ago, a group of people stood beside a giant stone. They knew they would never see the world we live in today. They did not know their names would disappear, but they still built, they still planned, and they still believed the structure was worth the effort. That is what makes ancient monuments so fascinating. They are not only about stones, they are about human ambition. They show what people can achieve when they work together. And they also remind us that ancient societies were much more complex than we sometimes imagine. They could organize workers, transport materials, build roads, manage food supplies, solve engineering problems, and complete projects that took years. The final monument may look simple: a few giant stones standing together. But behind those stones was an entire system. And there is one more important point: we still do not know everything. Archaeologists continue to debate exactly how some ancient monuments were built. Different places may have used different methods. Some techniques may have been lost completely. That is why mystery remains. Maybe there was no single secret. Maybe the real secret was a combination of simple ideas used in very clever ways. Ropes, wood, levers, ramps, water, human strength, and above all, cooperation. The ancient builders did not need modern machines to change the world. They only needed to understand the tools they had. And that may be the greatest lesson these stones have left behind. The stones that survived. Thousands of years have passed since the first giant stones were moved. The people who built them are gone. Their homes have disappeared. Their tools have turned to dust. But the stones are still here. They survived wars. They survived storms. They survived the rise and fall of entire civilizations. And today, they give us a small window into the ancient world. When we look at a massive stone monument, it is easy to think about the stone itself. But the real story is the people behind it. Farmers who produced the food, workers who cut the stone, craftsmen who made the tools, people who built the roads and ramps, and thousands of workers who pulled together. They were ordinary people, but together they created something extraordinary. We may never know exactly how every ancient monument was built. Some methods are still debated. Some knowledge may have been lost forever, but we do know one thing: ancient people were capable of solving incredibly difficult problems. They observed nature, they learned from mistakes, they improved their tools, and they passed their knowledge from one generation to another. The giant stones are proof of that. They remind us that technology does not always need to be complicated. Sometimes a simple idea can change everything. A rope, a wooden lever, a ramp, a group of people working together. That may have been enough to move something that looked impossible. And perhaps that is why these ancient monuments still fascinate us. They make us ask questions. How did they do it? Why did they build it? Who stood here thousands of years ago? And what did they hope their work would become? We may never have every answer, but maybe we do not need them, because the mystery itself is part of the story. The stones have already survived longer than the people who built them ever could. They have become silent witnesses to human history, and every time we look at them, we are reminded of something simple. The ancient world was not primitive. It was different. People had fewer tools, but they had time, knowledge, patience, and cooperation. With those things, they were able to build something that could outlive them. Thousands of years later, we are still standing beside their work, still asking questions, still searching for answers, and the stones are still there, silent, heavy, and waiting for us to understand them. Thank you for watching Lost World History. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories from the ancient world. See you in the next story.